For as long as people have existed, we've been trying to close the distance between us. From letters to wires to voices traveling across continents. Then suddenly, everything changed. The internet, a new kind of infrastructure for moving information. And once information could move instantly, the world reorganized around it. Communication became real time. Distance became irrelevant, but money didn't follow. Even as the world became internet native, money stayed tied to systems that weren't. It moves, but not instantly. It connects, but through layers. Now that's starting to change. For the first time, value can move with the properties of the internet. Faster, programmable, and global. And when that happens, the systems built on top of it begin to change too. Because when financial infrastructure works the way it should, businesses don't slow down. They build, they scale. And that's exactly what we're building for. This is how money moves now. This is Bitnob.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bitnob webinar series. My name is Musa Isaka. I am the head of enterprise business here at Bitnob, and we're glad to have you with us at this webinar today. Very quickly, just introduce who we are at Bitnob. So Bitnob, we are a digital asset infrastructure provider. We help small and medium-sized businesses move money, move value in general across borders, primarily based on stable coins and Bitcoin. Today, we are going to be going through our webinar series. The title of the webinar is Stablecoin Treasury Management. We're going to be investigating how teams around the world are upgrading their treasury infrastructure to enable greater cross-border liquidity. Thank you for being with us. And without further ado, we will be heading right into the presentation today. We're very excited for you guys to be with us. Like I mentioned, the title of our webinar is Stablecoin Treasury Management. And very briefly, we'll just a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll spend the first 5 minutes with an introduction to the webinar. We'll frame it and set expectations for what we're going to be discussing today. Then we'll be talking about the regulatory moments we find ourselves in Nigeria, Africa, and like on a global scale, right? And then we'll be investigating the business case and kind of discussing what advantages integrating stablecoins can bring to your business, right? And then we'll be taking you through a short demo of a product we have developed with lots of love here at Bitnob, and then going through a quick Q&A. So please, if you have questions, let us know, and then we can close out and talk about where we go from here. Like I mentioned, right, we're discussing stablecoins, and I think it's good to sort of frame what we're going to be doing today, right? This is not an investment pitch. When I'm not going to be discussing how to get rich quick. I'm not going to be discussing investment strategies, although maybe we can have that discussion in further webinars that we do, but that's not what we're talking about today. This is a conversation about what your infrastructure could look like in 3 years, when you decide to integrate stablecoins into your treasury operations. We'll be talking about what stablecoins are. For those who are not familiar with it, stablecoins are a specific type of digital asset that are pegged one-to-one with their fiat counterparts, right? And they're the digital asset that's specifically designed for payments. If you spent a lot of time in the Bitcoin and like crypto space more broadly, a big criticism we get, a big sort of like objection we get is that digital assets in general are bad for payments. They're like Bitcoin and Ethereum are bad for payments, but Bitcoin and Ethereum are not designed to facilitate. Well, they can facilitate, but that's not their primary function. Stablecoins are primarily designed for payments, and so that's what we're focusing on today. And because stablecoins are primarily designed for payments, it's only right that we have a side-by-side comparison of what life on a stablecoin will look like versus what the traditional fiat banking system looks like today. The first thing I want to sort of discuss is transaction costs, right? Using the traditional banking rails, you can spend between 3 to 8% to move money from one part of the world to another. Meanwhile, using stablecoins in particular, the transaction cost is significantly less, right? It's less than 1%. And settlement times as well. I'm sure we're like using the traditional fiat rails, we're used to T+1, T+2, and that's when things go very, very smoothly, right? If there's a problem in miscommunication along the chain, that can balloon up to 5 days, even a couple weeks if you're very, very unlucky. Meanwhile, with stablecoin rails, you can send the same value to the same part of the world, and we can assure you that as long as you're sending stablecoins, you will get the settlements in less than 10 minutes. I'm using 10 minutes because the quote unquote the slowest of the blockchains out there, which is Bitcoin, generally a new block is generated every 10 minutes. So with that, we assure that regardless of the blockchain you're using, you get final settlement in 10 minutes. And another aspect that is not often talked about, but it's very relevant to those of us, like I'm talking to you right now from Lagos, Nigeria. And from time to time, we have this acute periods of dollar constraints where you just can't have access to the dollars you need to run your businesses. With stablecoins, that risk is limited, right? It's like near zero. You always have stablecoins accessible for your business and for your treasury operations. Yeah, so that's kind of like what we're talking about today. And I think our core message for this for today is that stablecoins are no longer the playthings of geeks and nerds and niche communities on the internet, right? They're becoming more and more globally relevant, and they're no longer experimental at all. Now, stablecoins are an institutional asset, and businesses who are adopting them today are already reaping benefits. And we expect these benefits to only compound and get better and more profound over time. So yeah, so now we kind of have like a good idea of what stablecoins are. Like I mentioned earlier, stablecoins are the specific type of digital asset that are pegged one-to-one with their fiat value counterparts. And most times, well, the biggest criticism people get to stablecoins are that governments are going to outrightly ban it. And to be honest, we have faced certain jurisdictions banning this, but the regulatory landscape has definitely shifted, right? We're no longer in a place where governments are just banning stablecoins outright. Now, stablecoins are legally defined instruments in the world's largest financial market, which is the US, right? And the risks of stablecoins being banned has been reduced to nearly zero. We are no longer worried about governments banning us from using stablecoins in our treasury operations. So we're going to now we know what stablecoins are. We'll be talking about the regulatory environment and the regulatory frameworks that sort of surround stablecoins. The first kind of like point I want to bring up is the Genius Act, right? The Genius Act was passed in the United States, I think like sometime last year, and it sets a compliance bar that has repercussions that flow downstream, right? Like the most popular stable coins, USDT, USDC, that are pegged one-to-one with the US dollar are regulated digital assets. And because they are regulated digital assets, we have some benefits, right? The first of which is issuer accountability. The Genius Act mandates that the issuers of stablecoins have a verifiable currency reserve, and then they undergo audits and disclosure standards behind every dollar token that they establish. Further on in the presentation, we'll be talking about the specific issuers and how they give these attestations and the frequency in which they give them. But for now, we know that this is enshrined in the Genius Act and is enshrined into law, right? Another point is counterparty trust, because we know that like the stablecoins are no longer just unbacked private IOUs. Now there's a regulatory framework that backs them. Stablecoins they've sort of like developed trust. You know, we can trust them, we can use them. We're no longer afraid of being rugged. And in the digital asset space, the fear of being rugged is real, and we need to take it seriously. And for stablecoins, that comes in like depegging and different other sort of like events that could happen. But with the Genius Act, We assure that there's counterparty trust, and the federal government in these jurisdictions where the stablecoins are issued are making sure, and they are protecting us from any like fraudulent or bad actors that wants to come as issuers of stablecoins. And that results in downstream clarity. The recognition that the US government gives them creates a defensible point to auditors and regulators in our own sort of like local markets. We now have a defensible point to talk about stablecoins. And there are two layers I sort of want to separate here. The first of which is the issuer layer, which the Genius Act sort of like covers for us. With the Genius Act, we know that the issuers are regulated and they have rules that they must abide by. But another layer is like the local environment. Like we need to talk about what it's like to use and move stablecoins in our own local markets. And this is an evolving space. We don't have the clarity we have in the issuer side of things due to Genius Act, but this space is still evolving, and we'll talk about this now. And the best way to look at it is to go in each local market, because it really, really depends on which market you are operating in. In Nigeria, I think it happened in 2019, 2020, where the CBN came with a blanket act. The CBN is sort of a banking regulator. And so they restricted banks from interacting with anybody that had any business with digital assets and stablecoins. There was a blanket ban. But now we see that that restriction has been lifted. And our Securities and Exchange Commission in Nigeria has developed an accelerated licensing framework for individuals who are operating in this space. So I think we've moved from a restrictive environment to one of like cautiously opening the market to digital asset players and stablecoin users. Looking at Ghana, Ghana is also following suit as other African markets are, to be very honest. Ghana has created, their SEC in Ghana has created a sandboxed environment to allow individuals and companies who want to sort of operate with stablecoins to experiment and get familiar with it in this kind of like sandbox regulatory environment. And Kenya, which is leading the way in stablecoin and digital asset regulation in Africa. Their CMA, their Capital Markets Authority, has proposed a full comprehensive digital asset regulation, right? And which is going through the legislative bodies as we speak. We expect it to be passed into law this year, or hopefully by very early next year, we should have this framework passed as law. So we can see that like we are in an evolving space, and this evolves. And this is kind of like peculiar to the local market you're working in. But we are moving from a point where like the regulators were totally against it and blanket bans and a very prohibitive environment. We're moving to one where like we're having cautious opening, but we're generally tending in the right direction. And this position is something your compliance teams can definitely work with. It's a defensible position where you can defend your integration of stablecoins to your auditors, to your compliance teams, to your different boards, and to anyone who actually cares to ask for any reason whatsoever. But stablecoins are no longer banned. They're legal tender, and we can use them in our treasury operations. And the local markets are becoming cognizant of that. And we're even seeing the more advanced, the more sort of like efficient governments incorporating stablecoins into their financial markets, incorporating digital assets more broadly into their regulatory regimes. So we're no longer in that position. And now we have a good idea of like what stablecoins are, and we've kind of discussed a bit about the regulatory environment, both for issuers and for users of stablecoins. Now we need to talk about the business case. Why is it important for you to integrate stablecoins into your business? And we sort of alluded to this earlier in our conversation, earlier in this webinar, the first of which is transaction costs, right? The difference between 3 to 8% and less than 1% is huge. It's not something to be scoffed at. It can be the difference between a struggling business and a defensible moat and a thriving business in your market. And this sort of like gain, this transaction cost gain is real and tangible, and businesses are benefited from it today. The second is settlement times. Like I mentioned earlier as well, in the traditional fiat world, we're used to T+1, T+2. You know, the moving from T+3 3 to T+1 is celebrated in our traditional market as a huge boost in efficiency. But using stablecoins, the transaction settlement is almost nearly instant. And worst case scenario, for the more paranoid and the more like security conscious of us in the market, at maximum, you get settlements in 10 minutes. And this has repercussions even for your FX window and like FX exposure, right? Because there's real risk of underpaying and overpaying, especially in markets like ours, where we know that our currency is very highly volatile, and this exchange rates can move between when you send the money and when it's actually settled, or when your recipients gets value. There are many cases where people have sent value at certain exchange rates, and the exchange rates used to deliver value to their recipients is very different, and then it results in overpayments or even underpayments, and for if you're using traditional sort of fiat rails, and this risk is near zero using stable coins. And also the liquidity model, for banks in the fiat system, they use a pre-funded sort of model when they're moving value from one part of the world to another. That means they have to sort of fund value in these parts of the world before they can actually send money, and that results in a lot of trapped capital and a lot of trapped funds, and that's a real risk. It's a loss of efficiency for your business. Meanwhile, using stable coins, you get this value on demand. You get on-demand value for your for the money you're moving. You don't have to pre-fund account balances in different parts of the world to get money to move from one place to another. And then dollar access. So even if, like I experienced it for the first time in Nigeria, where like even if you need to pay this inflated exchange rate, and you're ready to play it, but just getting access to the dollars is very, very difficult. Dollar access is capped and rationed because of the dollar scarcity. But using stable coins, this never happens. Your dollar access is direct and even programmable. You can integrate dollar access into your systems to make sure you never in want, and you can always pay your suppliers at a moment's notice. So the business case for using stablecoins is real, it's tangible, and it's only compounding. This difference can be, like I mentioned earlier, can be the difference between a struggling business and a thriving business, especially in the markets we operate in. So, and in order to kind of like integrate stable coins into your business properly, we need to understand who the issuers of these stable coins are. We're going to talk through the two major issuers of a US dollar stable coins, which are Circle, which are the issuers of USDC, and Tether, the issuer of USDT. Circle, for instance, they sort of provide cash, and they use cash and short-dated US treasuries to back as a backing for their stable coins, and they hold they're backing this cash and treasuries in regulated custodians, and they give you monthly reports. They give you monthly attestations of what their reserves look like. So you're not guessing. You don't have to take a huge leap of faith. You know where the value sits, what backs the digital tokens that you were using. USDT, which is like the OG stable coin. They were the first stable coins in the market, and as such, they're the most liquid, and they're the most used, especially in emerging markets like the ones most of us, I'm sure, operating right now. But they publish quarterly attestations, but all the same, we know that the value we are moving via these tokens is backed by real capital, and it creates real user accountability. So we see that the Genius Act has really, really raised the bar for for digital assets in general, but for stablecoins in particular. User accountability and monthly attestations allow your compliance department and your auditors and your board of directors to be sure that whatever you're integrating into your system isn't a fad, isn't going to disappear overnight. You know that this is not a leap of faith. You can perform serious and intentional due diligence on these assets. So we know we've kind of like seen what stablecoins are. We've spoken about the regulatory environment that they operate in, both internationally and in specific local markets. And now we need to talk about what it's like, or what you should look out for when you want to integrate stablecoins into your sort of product suite and into your treasury operations. What do enterprise wallets look like? What must they have? And what must you look for while picking your enterprise infrastructure for your business? First and foremost is you need a multi-wallet architecture. That goes without saying. Some consumer-facing wallets provide this, but as an enterprise, as a business, this is a necessity. You must have multi-wallet architecture in order to separate funds that you're keeping in your treasury, funds that you use to operate, and funds that you've kind of like earmarked to be moved for different currencies. You as a business, you do not want these streams to cross. You want to make sure, and it helps your auditability, and it helps for like accountability as well for yourself internally and also to your customers. Another thing that is very important for enterprise grade infrastructure is role-based access. You need permissions mapped to different departments within your organization. You need different permissions for your finance teams, for your operation teams, for your compliance teams, even for your legal teams, and like because they perform different functions within your organizations, you need different sets of permissions. And so role-based access and role-based permissions for enterprise grade software is totally necessary. Also, approval workflows. You need to be able to create transaction limits and multi-party sign-off before any value moves out of your wallets. Because digital assets, the stablecoins in particular, are bearer assets. And bearer assets means anyone who holds the assets can spend the assets. So in order for you to have controls, and these are controls that we actually expect from sort of like fiat and traditional banking counterparties, but this is necessary for your digital asset and stablecoin treasury management as well. And finally, which I think is the easiest for stablecoins to perform, is integration into your ERPs and your already existing financial stack. Stablecoins are very, very highly programmable. So you need an enterprise software, you need enterprise infrastructure that allows you to take advantage of this programmability, that integrates into the systems your teams already used to, and like the systems that you use to keep your books. You need this ERP and like financial stack APIs. It's a necessity for your enterprise grade stablecoin software or product. And finally, you need compliance. Compliance is important. Anyone running a business knows that if you don't think about compliance, you are planning to fail. And you need compliance to be built in to any system you are integrated into your product. So what does this mean? Means KYB. You need to perform rigorous KYB on the business level and on the individual level, so you know who you're dealing with and you know who your counterparties are. And it's generally required in all the frameworks we've spoken about, especially for the sandboxes and the pilot programs that are being run in our local markets. KYB is generally non-negotiable. Another thing you need to do, and that stablecoins particularly matters for stablecoins in particular, is transaction monitoring. You need to be able to know who you're transacting with, what the value is coming in and what value is going out, and continuously and because with stablecoins you have like thousands of transactions happening a day. You need to monitor them continuously to make sure like you are not mingling or commingling your funds with like illicit financing or like funds that have been sort of flagged by sanctions, which brings us to the third point, which is sanction screening, or and which is part of what we call internally at Bitnob KYT. You need to know the transactions and know where the transactions are from. And in digital assets, there's some addresses or some funds that are being flagged. Maybe they've been part of a hack or they're part of illicit funds flow. You need to be able to make sure you can protect your business from coming into contact with this kind of funds while operating your stablecoin treasury internally. And finally, reporting. Compliance doesn't work without audits. You need to be able to audit your transaction flow. Your software needs to be able to provide you that auditability, like every action captured in full audit trail. So your auditors and your compliance team are satisfied and are okay. They can green light your stablecoin usage because all these things are present. So compliance is not something that should be scoffed at, shouldn't be overlooked. It's integral for any business that wants to integrate stablecoins into their own like treasury operations or treasury infrastructure properly. So that's kind of like a brief overview of what we're doing and the different facets of like stable coins. Now we want to sort of go through Q&A, right? We want to get a quick Q&A to kind of frequently asked questions, right? And if we have time, maybe we can take some questions from you, the audience. The first question I want to talk about is, how do auditors treat stablecoins on the balance sheet? And the short answer is, they treat it in just the same way they treat any other assets on their balance sheet. Like any asset you put on your balance sheet is given the same treatment as stablecoins. And because of the enterprise software you choose, you need to be sure that these products, you're choosing can create auditable records for your compliance teams, for your auditors to be able to go through the transactions you're making, right? You need to be able to be sure that that they have full visibility into your stablecoin usage. So you don't treat it any different from any other asset you hold on your balance sheet. You make sure that it's full and clear auditability of your records. Another question we get very often is, give me a second, just move to the next slide, is, does this mean we're like, by integrating stablecoins, does it mean we need to jettison our banking relationships? And the answer to that is no. This just gives you extra optionality. When I'm not here telling you to replace your banking relationships completely. These are relationships that have served the test of time, and so we need to tread carefully, in replacing tried and tested and critical infrastructure that we've built in our teams. But most people have this as a secondary option, and the key idea here is control. If you can control what flows you need to push through your legacy system and what flows you push through your stablecoin infrastructure as well. And then, is it legal? This is the biggest question we get. Is it legal? Is it legal to operate in our system? The answer is maybe. Although stablecoins, the Genius Act sort of gives clarity for stablecoin issuance. It depends on where you are. In some markets, using stablecoins might bring a lot of like questions from authorities, and this is mostly because they don't understand it. It's still brand new. But what we're seeing in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, is that the regulators are very eager to learn. They're very eager to work with you. Then they're not Luddites, right? They're not trying to stifle innovation in any way. They just want to make sure that no illicit funds is happening, no illicit funds are being siphoned and passed through the system. They want full clarity of over what you're using your stable coins to, and the operational advantages are very, very clear. So right now, we've moved away from the highly prohibitive stance that I've seen in the Nigerian market, in the Kenyan market, in the Ghanaian market, and we're moving to a more accommodative stance in these markets. So that's kind of like an overview of what I have prepped for now. Hopefully in future webinars, we'll be able to walk you through the product we've built internally, so you can have an idea of what world-class sort of like digital asset infrastructure looks like. You get to see it in operation. You get to see us receive funds onto our wallets. You get to see us move funds from one wallet to another, and then you get to see what the transaction audits look like, what the audit reports actually look like, and we'll make sure we can make this available for you in future webinars. So yeah, that's kind of like what we've built. A quick sort of like reminder about what we've done at Bitnob. At Bitnob, we've been in operations for a bit over 5 years now. We've processed over $4.6 billion in volumes. We are SOC 2 compliant, we are ISO compliant, and these things matter. If we're here telling you to integrate stablecoins into your infrastructure, we are telling you because we have reaped the benefits of it, and we help thousands of businesses every day operate their stablecoin treasuries from end to end. So this is stuff we've done. This is stuff we're very good at. So please, 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 please book a demo with us. Come talk to us. We bring your real corridors. Tell us where you want to send money to. Bring your volumes to us, and please contact us. You can contact us at sales@bitnob.com, and we are very, very happy to take all your questions and like walk you through it. We're very open. We love to hear from you. That's why we're here, and we're here preaching the good news of stablecoins to the African market and the world at large. So yeah, that's kind of like a short overview, 30 minutes webinar about what we do at Bitnob and stablecoins more broadly. I hope you'll be able to find this webinar informative, and please, we hope you're able to reach out to us, talk to us, and come book a demo with us. We'll take you through the product we've built, and so you can see for yourself, that these things exist and these things bring real value to your business. But yeah, that's it from us. Hope you had a lovely time with us. I definitely had a lovely time talking to you. Hopefully we see you again for the next iteration of our webinar. Thank you, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
For as long as people have existed, we've been trying to close the distance between us. From letters to wires to voices traveling across continents. Then suddenly, everything changed. The internet, a new kind of infrastructure for moving information. And once information could move instantly, the world reorganized around it. Communication became real time. Distance became irrelevant, but money didn't follow. Even as the world became internet native, money stayed tied to systems that weren't. It moves, but not instantly. It connects, but through layers. Now that's starting to change. For the first time, value can move with the properties of the internet. Faster, programmable, and global. And when that happens, the systems built on top of it begin to change too. Because when financial infrastructure works the way it should, businesses don't slow down. They build, they scale. And that's exactly what we're building for. This is how money moves now. This is Bitnob.